I'll start with the formal news. The DNC moving forward on an earlier delegate vote, as we've been reporting. You're part of all that as an official. So what does that mean? What do you see in this fast coalescence around Harris? And how are your meetings and possible running mate activities going?
Well, I'm a delegate, too. I get to vote for Kamala Harris this week. Very excited about that. And, of course, we're planning a phenomenal convention here in Chicago. The excitement is palpable. The United Center, which is where the convention will happen, is being spruced up, looking terrific. Just was there the other day. We're going to have, I don't know, about 15, 20, 25,000 people in there, and it's going to be a rocking good time.
And are you still open to being a running mate if asked?
Well, listen, I'm not going to talk about the conversations I've had about that. I will say, though, that Kamala Harris is the perfect person at this moment. We've got the kind of palpable excitement, the energy that we really need in the party to carry us to victory in November. And, of course, Donald Trump is, I think, bewildered by it all. I don't know that he has any idea how to handle the excitement that's happening on the Democratic side or Kamala Harris herself. Let's face it, I think we've seen that he doesn't want to debate her. He's sort of afraid of her. I'm not exactly sure what it is that keeps him from, admitting that he, should debate her. But I'm excited about the fact that they're going to have a debate because I really think he can't not give in to this. And she's going to prosecute the case. He's a guy who's, 34-time convicted felon, a fraudster. And he's a congenital liar, of course, and he's been held liable for sexual assault. I think there's a lot of fodder there for her, not to mention the extremist views that he brings to the table, which he demonstrated in Chicago yesterday in front of that National Association of Black Journalists meeting.
You mentioned that you're not going to discuss the conversations you had about being a running mate. As a lawyer, then I have to ask, that means you've had some conversations.
Well, naturally, people have called to talk to me about the possibility of being the vice presidential candidate. I'm not going to say who those people were or talk about those conversations, but I'm flattered by all of it. I have to say, and I've said it many times before, being governor of Illinois is, of course, a thrilling experience. We've had a lot of success here, really accomplished quite a lot. We banned assault weapons here. We raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We've protected reproductive rights, not just for women who live in Illinois, but also those who are escaping their states, needing to have those reproductive rights upheld. And we've offered that to people who come to our state. So we've got a lot to offer as a state, and I'm thrilled to continue to be governor if that's what is in the cards. And that's actually what I've been expecting all along.
Yeah, understood. Got to ask. You mentioned what's coming down the pike at the convention, as well as your leadership in Illinois, which is a very diverse state in general. And the Democratic Party there has benefited from diversity. And we're seeing something where the notion of full and inclusive diversity for everyone is, if I may, hot right now. We've talked to I had a young voter on last night who was dancing at the Harris rally in Atlanta. We just heard from Maya Wiley, who ran a path-breaking candidacy herself in New York. The white dudes for Harris, who are having fun with it, but also saying this is for everybody. The Guardian headline here is that the white dudes call, which came after the white women and the other constituency calls, did 4 million. I'd include Governor Walz, Governor Pritzker, yourself, which is why I'm asking you about it, Buttigieg, Bridges, Star Wars, Mark Hamill. We have a little bit of the dude moment. How could we not? Take a look.
I am not Mr. Lebowski. You're Mr. Lebowski. I'm the dude.
I'm white, I'm a dude, and I'm for Harris. A woman president, man. How exciting.
Talk about the excitement for people who weren't on the call or just learning about this. What were you doing? What was this call about? And how does it relate to what you're doing in a place like Illinois, where if diversity means diversity, literally everybody, that's great. And the fact that some in the right wing have hijacked that and tried to actually turn it into something exclusive, that somehow that means a white governor or a white man or whatever isn't welcome. The Harris campaign seems to be finding fun, open ways to circumvent that. But tell us about it.
Well, that is what those calls are all about. There's even a call for deadheads for Kamala Harris. And so I sent that off to my brother, who's a deadhead, to make sure that he joins. And it's just an opportunity, I think, to demonstrate that diversity that you're talking about.
I'll only jump in to say, tell your brother that here on the beat we said, U.S. Blues, call Uncle Sam, that's who I am. And he'll complete the rest when you guys have time.
100%. I think he's been to maybe hundreds of Dead concerts and the subsequent bands that have come from the Grateful Dead. But anyway, I'm actually a fan of the way the Harris campaign has done this. It's obviously not to divide people. It's actually to bring people together and to remind people that we have people from all walks of life who are engaged in this campaign and energized by Kamala Harris. And so we had fun on that call. It wasn't anything about the ethnicity or race of anybody on the call. It was really just a bunch of guys talking about how great it is that we all have gotten together and feel that pull toward electing Kamala Harris. She'll be a historic president of the United States. But importantly, she brings with her the issues that are important to people of all backgrounds. And I listened to Mark Hamill. I listened to all the other stars that were on. We had, of course, Tim Walz on the call, Roy Cooper. We have some great governors from all around the country who are on it. So I'm really excited. I think that white dude's moniker was funny and a way for everybody to get together in a playful manner.
All really interesting, including your answers on your place on the running mate list, how busy you are in your state, and obviously with the convention, which MSNBC will be covering, 360 degrees. And again, tell your brother we said hello. In the diversity of our team, we have a segment, aficionado, senior leader of the team who's a huge deadhead. And I'm only not.
Well, we have Lollapalooza is happening this weekend here in Chicago, and my kids and tens of thousands of others are going to be there. I've heard other governors talk about how they've canceled their weekend plans. I was going to perform, of course, with Blink 182 on
great.
Sunday, but I've canceled in order to clear my schedule.